Hey guys, here with you today for another Shirogorov knife review. This one is on the Russian Overkill collaboration with Sergey Shirogorov and RJ Martin. This knife debuted the full custom version at Blade Show 2019. And like many of the other collaborations, that custom version eventually gave way to a limited production version, a run of 200 pieces, one of them that you see right here. And overall, I think Sergey did a really great job replicating the mechanics and the aesthetics of RJ's Overkill design. Now strap back. This video I think is going to be a long one. Of course, I do these all in one take, so it's fairly stream of consciousness, but I try to keep it structured. But anyways, going on the background, RJ Martin, very well known for his lightning fast flipper knives, and this knife does not disappoint in that respect. I'll go ahead and talk about the action a little bit later. The design, as you can see, is very much RJ Martin. Many of his knives look similar, at least to me. I'm not an RJ expert, but I do have some experience with his knives. I had a Q36 that I won at lottery about 1.5 years ago, and his Overkill model, I think, is a framelock version of that, of the Q36 or something like that. Not too clear. Please apologize if I got that mixed up. So let's go ahead here and take a look at the dimensions of the knife and the specs. Now we have a knife here that is, that is just under 9 inches long when opened, with a cutting length of, I want to say just under 4, perhaps maybe 4 inches when accounting the curve on the belly of the blade. Now when the knife is closed, you can see here that the overall length of the handle is just under 5 inches as well. Let's take a look at the weight. So in grams, we have a knife that is 134.1 grams. I believe officially it's 134 exactly. So again, pretty spot on there. If you take a look at the ounces, that is equivalent to 4.73 ounces. Now, comparing it to some other knives that you may know, we have here an F95 size knife. And as you can see here, the knives are very similar in size. The butt of the Russian Overkill is just a little bit longer. Officially, I think this knife has a blade size of 100 millimeters exactly, as opposed to 95 on the F95 design, of course. So this would pretty much explain the size difference. We also have a neon here. As you can see, the neon is clearly smaller. So I would say that if you're used to carrying a 95 size knife, the Russian Overkill will fit pretty much in there exactly the same. Probably won't notice the difference. Now, going on to the blade, there are just so many wonderful things I can say about this blade. At first, I wasn't really a fan of RJ's blades. I really dislike any blades that have this kind of hump on here. Who's another? I think Les George has a couple of knives with that design as well. But, after owning an RJ Martin, I kind of got more accustomed to them. And I'm really glad to see that this feature carried over onto the Russian Overkill. The wide blade flats here are just absolutely wonderful and showing off the satin finish that Shirogorov just excellently executes every single time. If you take a look here, man, this satin finish is just amazing. It's approaching a mirror, and in natural light, it's even more stunning. The mirror-like qualities. I have a pretty harsh light coming in from my light box here, so you're really seeing like the individual grains of the satin finish. But man, this is an excellently done satin finish. I think why it strikes me so much more is this large area of the flats. It just gives Shirogorov so much more room to show off that sand finish. in comparison, you know, if you take a look at my F7, you know, there's satin blade flats, but the area is just not even close to being the same. Same thing with my Neon here as well. It's not even close. And you know, you don't really see the satin finish in the production knives, only really in the collaborations, custom vision tier and higher. So having such a large blade flat, fully satin finished is absolutely amazing. Now, the primary bevel, of course, is done in that finer stone wash that you see, finer than the production knives. And both logos of the collaborators are deeply etched into the knife. This is not just normal laser engraving. This is actual tactile engraving, etching into the knife, both Sergey and RJ's logo here. Now, one thing that you can see here that has changed in the blade design is I believe RJ's knives usually have a slight recurve to them. This is just completely flat here. Honestly, while I do like a flat belly, I'm not a fan of recurves at all. I think it does take away from some of the charm that RJ's designs have. So I think it would have been interesting to see a slightly recurved belly here, but that's just something I would never see Sergey doing. So it didn't strike me as weird to, when the original Russian Overkill designs first popped up in the custom, where it didn't have that recurve. Another thing I do like here, as you can see, this what starts off as like chamfer for the jimping here to kind of soften up and make the jimping more comfortable, continues right here down the blade spine, but doesn't go all the way to the end. I think this is a really nice touch. Not really a swedge in my book, but a really nice feature, and gives the blade a little bit an extra dimension, especially when you have this wide satin finished blade fat here. It really finishes it off. Whoops. Yeah, let's just admire that a little bit more. Now, this flipper tab is amazing. Amazingly large, that is, and really is very, very RJ. I think this is the most RJ aspect of RJ's designs, is just that very uniquely shaped flipper tab that kind of mates very well with the design of the handle when open. But we'll talk about the action later. I think that deserves its own segment. The blade steel here is M398, which, as many of you guys may or may not know, is a relatively new knife to the market. It's a extremely long-lasting, very high edge retention steel that comes from Bowler. Many of you guys know M390, and I don't think it's a variation of M390. It's a different formulation. It might be, again, I'm not a steel expert, but it's incredibly high edge retention, but very significantly lower toughness. The edge retention on here, I believe, is on par with like S110V, so it's really high up there. I believe it's actually not as tough as S110V, and I think that really goes to show how, you know, brittle the steel is. For most folder tasks, I think you're fine. I personally prefer edge retention myself over toughness, since I'm not really chopping trees or doing anything crazy like that. But that is something to note when you, if you decide to use this knife in any capacity. Definitely look into the steel and figure out its limitations before you go ahead and, you know, chip the edge severely on this knife, instead of expecting the edge to roll or something like that. But going on to the handle, you can see here that what strikes you first is this radial milling that kind of starts from the lock bar cut out here, or for your fingers when you're holding the knife. Really well done. This milling is reminiscent of the silk milling that you see in other knives, but just with a steeper radial, a tighter radial pattern here. I really love how it kind of, the pattern integrates with the raised portion for the pivot collar and pivot screw area here. This newer, larger domed pivot screw is what you see being used in the Quantum in F3NS. But of course, this has the non-free spinning indexed pivot screw here. Again, combined with the thinner pivot collars that you see on some of these newer knives as well. The handles are contoured, extremely so. These handles are quite thin. And personally, you know, I usually think I would like to say that I like a thinner knife, but this knife combined, you know, I don't think it's that much taller. It's probably, yeah, it's not even taller than the F95 or this F7 here. But the F7 contouring, something about it is just a little bit more round, and I really prefer that in the hand. I'm not sure if it's this angle here that kind of bisects the radial milled portion of the handle and the non-milled portion of the handle, but it feels contoured, but at the same time, I wish there was just a little bit more meat. My only gripe with it, very minimal gripe, and I think, you know, Sergey was going for a stylistic statement here with the design of the handle. But I will say that for better or for worse, these handles feel really thin in the hand, which some people do like. Now, the show side in particular, as you can see, has no screws that are showing, which is a very recent trend in these limited knives and also the customs as well. The only thing that you have back here that is showing is this backspacer hole, which I think is incredibly un-Shurgorov-like. Let's compare this to some other backspacers. Again, I know these are full customs, but you'll see similar designs in the production knives as well. This F7 has a lanyard loop on the backspacer that looks very well integrated. It's almost invisible when you know, if you're not looking for it. This Neon, the lanyard loop is a little bit more visible, but it kind of matches the overall profile of the knife. This lanyard loop, I'm not sure what's going on here. I'm not sure why it's chamfered in this way. I actually think the original RJ Martin design has something similar to this as well. But I think just having, you know, this looks hole punched, right? Having the hole just go straight through the handles and the backspacer, and having it be a hole as well. I think it just could have been a little bit more well integrated. The Russian Hokkaido is an example of this. I think that Sergey did a great job integrating the lanyard loop on. But again, it definitely was more of a Sergey design than in this situation, an RJ design. So I could understand if they were going for the RJ aesthetic here. Just perhaps maybe is not my taste. Now moving on to the backspacer here, you can see this geared pattern, which we've seen in some older knives, such as some Neons and stuff like that. This geared backspacer is also combined with that faux floating backspacer effect that you get on the Quantum. Now, when I first saw this knife at Blade Show, I wasn't actually aware of this feature, and I thought the backspacers were just completely touching the handle scales. But now that I've owned a Quantum, I can definitely see what's going on here, and I really love what Sergey has done here. It's very, very small, thin gaps, but there definitely is a floating effect here. Let me open up the blade here. You can see that gap here, and it's really well done. The backspacer is also slightly proud where the gear pattern starts, so that you can definitely have something tactile in your hands. You can definitely feel the backspacer in the palm of your hand without having it be obtrusive or in the way. And of course, like many other more recent knives, the blade sits perfectly in the backspacer. Shurgorov always taking every opportunity to show off the centering of their blades, and this one is no exception. Now, taking a look at the lock side here, there's a couple things that I'd like to talk about. One is this clip. This clip, the overall shape of the clip, I don't really have too much of a problem with. I don't really see too much RJ in the design, but again, I don't have a Q36 or an Overkill in front of me to compare. But this clip doesn't really strike me as RJ. I don't remember what the clip looks like. But I think more importantly is I'm not really sure what the design language is here of this like milled slot. I want to say, you know, going back to many knives, the, you know, Custom Division Neon NL, this Neon right here, or my F7, you can see that the clips have like a theme going on with them. This one, you know, having vents in the clip to match the vents on the handle and the blade slot here, or this Neon, which I think is one of the best examples. You see you have the blade here with these 3 milled slots here. The flipper tab has 3 milled slots. You have 3 windows here on the handle, and you have these 3 notches here on the clip. It's kind of a design language. I'm not sure why Sergey decided to go with this like wide milled portion, kind of like slot here. It doesn't really match anything that else that's going on with the knife, at least from what I can see. It does look nice, and I think it gives some an otherwise boring clip some flair, I guess. But again, I really wish the design language was a little bit more cohesive, especially when, you know, I've seen what Sergey can do with some of his other knives. Another thing too is these 2 screws here on the back of the handle. Now, again, when you take a look at, you know, pretty much any shear grove knife that has a backspacer, and this is a custom, but the production knives are like this too. Oh, actually, this is a bad example since there's no screws here, but on an F95, you have a, you know, female Chicago, a male screw assembly here that goes through, and, oh, sorry, like a hottie with a backspacer, and you'll have like a floating, you know, a blind pin here that goes through that doesn't really show up on the outside of the handles. It is when you take it apart. I don't understand why that same design philosophy could not have been applied here, why there needed to be 2 screws, especially since these screws are you know, blind threaded here. Like, this one could have easily just been a blind pin. No need for 2 screws here. I'm not sure if they were if that was kind of an RJ aesthetic thing that they're going for, because since I believe the RJ Martin knives do have 2 screws here. But again, that was a little disappointing to see that on this knife. I really don't think that 2 rear screws were necessary on the handle. One positive thing I do like about the lock side though is that, like, again, many other knives, I think this isn't too surprising now considering that we've seen in the past, but just underneath the clip and for the lock bar cutout, you can see that radial milling continued, which is really nice as well. Actually, you know what? Got to go back to the clip a little bit more. This clip is borderline unusable for me. You know, I don't really wear jeans that often, which are thicker, but even for like these thinner, you know, dress slacks or stuff that I wear, this clip just does not work with pants. You can see how it's pretty deeply recessed into the handle. That combined with the relatively low clip here, and, you know, what seems to be a very shallow ramp here for the clip to kind of catch onto material, really makes this clip like a no-go for me. I've even tried on my jeans, and the jeans are pretty much impossible. Like, I kind of have to angle the knife in such a way that I'm really getting the clip over the material, and it's really not good, especially when compared to my Neon and F7 and pretty much almost every other shear grove knife. I haven't had a shear grove clip this bad since I think like the Cannabis, the Sinkovich designed Cannabis, which had an absolutely horrendous clip as well. This one is up there with that. So I really wish they would improve on the clip design as well. Going on to the lock bar insert, you know, it's such a minor thing to point out, but I really do love this design aspect here. Speaking to a friend, shout out to Look for this one. I believe the reason why there's this raised point on the lock bar itself is so the screws have enough area so that the threads can be tapped in, so that there's enough engagement on that screw for the lock bar insert to be safely retained. And that really explains a lot, since we very often see this raised portion for knives where the lock bar insert is blind screwed. So really nice feature. And again, in just various angles of the light, you can see that it catches, the radial milling catches the light beautifully. Now, of course, like many other Sergey collaborations, as of recent, this knife is on single row roller bearings, and there is also very deep internal milling. It's very hard to see because this knife is so thin, but really nice milling here on the handles. So let's talk about the action and overalls. Now, I kind of weaved in a little, some details, such as the pocket clip. That was a really big issue for me. But what about the action? RJ Martin knives, I think, are really all about the action, and this knife really ticks all the boxes in that. If you're looking for an RJ Martin knife that has very nice modern design, this is definitely it. This knife just flies. The flipper tab is excellently placed, you know, right above the pivot, so you can get, you know, what do they call it? You're able to load the flipper tab and get a good amount of force on that tab before it breaks. This thing just flies out like grease lightning. And, you know, for a knife that has such a heavy detent and fairly stiff lock bar tension, I didn't expect it to be so drop shut as it is. As you can see here, it drops shut with no problem at all. And you're really getting the best of both worlds here. The RJ Martin that I had, the Q36, had an incredibly snappy detent and fast flying blade. But the fact that the lock bar tension was so tight, it wasn't really a drop shot blade. It wasn't that it was rough, but that's just not what the knife, I think, was designed to be. With this, you're really getting that sugar of action for the drop shot, and I think many people will really like that. Personally, I think I like a detent a little bit on the softer side. I don't want a floppy detent, but you know, my F7 I think is perfect for me, and this one is definitely easier to flip and easier to disengage. You know, I'm a lefty as well, for what it's worth. But I don't think that this knife is prohibitively tight for the lock bar tension, but missed the flipper tab there. But it definitely is a little bit crisper. So if you are ever thinking that your F95 detent was just a little bit too weak, this will definitely be a little bit more suited towards your taste, I think. But yeah, overall, what do I think about this knife? Again, I think I said this early in the video, I wasn't really warmed up to RJ's designs until I had a Q36 myself. And then even after then, before I let it go to my friend who was really into RJ, the Russian Overkill didn't really strike me at first as being, anything spectacular. But I will say, despite all of the issues that I've kind of outlined in this video, there really is something special about that flipping action. And I think that really speaks a lot about the knife. If you're a fan of RJ and you like that kind of action, you definitely will not be disappointed in this knife if you can get past some of the other things I've explained about in this video. The knife carries like an F95. It's in that size range, so there's really nothing new or exciting or unexpected on that front. But I think it really comes down to whether or not you enjoy the mechanics of an RJ Martin knife. And again, I think that might be a little bit difficult. I haven't handled any of like I'm not sure if he has ZT collaborations. I've really only handled his custom knives, and again, they're custom knives, so it's not like something that you can say, like, oh yeah, I have a lot of experience with RJ Martin knives. I'm assuming the amount of people who are like that is a very small pool. But if you ever liked his designs, and you also like Sergey, I guess, then this would be a really great knife to try out. And if those gripes that I've outlined before, especially with like the pocket clip, don't suit your taste, or are just like a deal breaker for you, yeah, I think that would be the only thing that would stop me. But personally, I think they did a really great job. And having spoken to RJ Martin at Blade Show in 2019 about the collaboration, he was very fortunate and very happy to have the opportunity to work with Sergey. And I'm sure that, you know, they did a lot of planning in this knife, and this is the look and aesthetic that they were going for. And I don't want to discourage any of you guys with, you know, my own personal taste, but I did want to give you kind of some insight into the knife from my point of view as a Shurov owner. And I'm hoping that you guys have found that feedback helpful. So that's it for this one. This one definitely did run a little bit longer, very much longer than some of my other videos, but I think there's a lot to talk about the knife. And, you know, the blade is gorgeous. The handle is very well done, just some nitpicks. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I appreciate you guys sticking around this long. Hope to see you next time, and hope you have a great day.